Ashworth,
Smith, oh, sorry.
Ashworth present.
Newman present.
McDonald present.
Smith, present.
Holloway present.
Right, present.
Let it be shown that we have a quorum. Can we all stand for a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance? Join in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The consent agenda. Does anyone object to approval of the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved by common consent. Number 5, public hearing. There's no public hearing. Zoning text, I'm sorry. Number 6, unfinished business. Review of proposed changes to the Cape Charles zoning ordinance, Section 7, Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. Markup of model ordinance as a result of state law changes, as well as proposed edits to the definitions, chapter Appendix A, and the site plan ordinance Appendix C.
Okay, just to start going through some of this, so we started this back in the fall, we stopped since they were still writing regulations. They had finished the regulations, and so they have now taken our work that we started in the fall. I asked them when I say ask them, I asked DEQ staff to start reviewing it for compliance and issues that we should identify as we're going through review to get us into conformance with the new state law and new state regulations. So that's the document we have before us. Yes, I know it's in a terrible format for tracking, and I'm still working with DEQ on some additional proposed changes. I met with them again for about an hour today. Still trying to go through things, and every time that they are here on the shore for other site visits and work they're doing, they're paying me a visit as well, so we can keep working on this. It's been a lengthy process. I needed to start pushing it out to you at this point. There is some time-sensitive responses that we have to have on this because we are under a compliance audit order. We had our compliance audit last year for what was now the reconstituted program of every 5 years. The DEQ will come in and do an audit of all Chesapeake Bay communities. We were community number 1 that started the process last year. In that process, they did issue us now their findings. We had about 4 items that we got cited on. Nothing that is, bone crushing terrible for us. A lot of them is ensuring that we are in compliance with the ordinance, the law, the maps, and then some internal checklists and processes as we're doing plan reviews for developments, whether that's a house or a business of any sort, things of that nature. So we're working through that. From a time-sensitive perspective, this ordinance we have to have fully adopted by March of 2026. Thank you, 26. However, there is one element to this, the resiliency assessment piece, which is a brand new section of this law. They want that adopted by the fall. They are looking for that to have in place by around August or September for us to have adopted. Of this year, yes. It is one of the key initiatives out of the governor's office is a resiliency office and officer. The state has over the last 3 years done a master resiliency plan for the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, which picks up the eastern shore. That is the springboard for how they're trying to address all coastal flooding, sea level rise considerations, anything else that may deal with resiliency as a whole for all of our coastal communities. So yes, part of that is they want to ensure in the Chesapeake Bay Act we have a resiliency assessment now be a requirement for any work that is occurring in the Chesapeake Bay overlay provisions or areas identified by those localities. So we're going to talk a fair bit about that because that was some of the questions I had with DEQ today about implementation of that assessment practice. But with that said, I'm trying to keep us moving forward on this. My hope and goal is that we get this out, I'm hoping by the end of August, at least over to council, for them to kick it off for a public hearing. I don't think it would be a lengthy public hearing process. This is very technical in nature, so there could be a great deal of public concern or request for information on this. Doubt it, but you never know. So let the state know where we are in this process. We're trying to move this along as quickly as possible. So as long as they see us moving progress and moving forward to resolve our compliance audit findings, they are happy to continue working with the locality. One of the big issues that they did identify for us is we've never really had a properly done map of the Chesapeake Bay overlay for the town of Cape Charles. So I am going to talk about what we do have. It has never been formally adopted by the town. These were just maps produced for the town along the way that the state said, at least we have something that people can visually see and work with. I'm going to explain what all the colors may mean. I know it's hard to read here, but the dark blue is the area is known as the RPA, Resource Protection Area. So again, quick and dirty, what is the Resource Protection Area? It is measured from, sorry, I'm going to give you the quick definition. The average mean high water mark of where the Chesapeake Bay or its tidal watershed lands are coming in at, and you measure from that point 100 feet in, that is the RPA. There are two elements to the RPA. The first 50 feet of that is called the seaward RPA. You cannot build in the seaward RPA. That is untouchable. In the other 50 landward, there is some allowances, very nominal allowances made. You can't put a whole house in it, but you may have some little tiny features of the house itself that could be located in that. But that 100 feet of RPA is the thing that we are trying to protect. It is meant to be a regeneration of water back into the bay, and the way to do that is through percolation coming through your soils, through your grasses, through your trees, through your bushes, things of that nature. So we don't want cutting of trees along the watershed. And I'm just not talking along the beach side, not just the bay. So when you go around, you're going to go all the way up the creeks that we have here, like in Bay Creek, those whole areas. Those are all areas that we measure RPA for as well. And so we don't want clear cutting right down to the shoreline just to improve your view of your lovely beachfront property or waterfront property. You're not supposed to do that, and if you do that, you're supposed to get in big trouble for doing that. So there is another element to the Chesapeake Bay Act called the RMA. That is not anywhere near defined on this map at this point in time. It references the RMA. The RMA roughly is a definition based upon land features. Do you have certain tidal wetlands? Do you have certain tidal shorelines? Do you have certain vegetation? Those are things that, I have to be candid, I don't think any of your staff that's ever been here in the last 20 years has had that sort of education, information, knowledge to properly enforce it or apply it. So one of the things we're going to be talking about under this draft ordinance is changing the definition of the resource management area and define it not by features, but again by a distance from the RPA. Because again, it is meant to be adjacent to the RPA. It is meant to help ensure that we are trying to ensure we have good cleanliness of water that's coming down. So when rainwater comes into this community, of course it does, when it percolates down into the Chesapeake Bay, we want it to be as clean as possible. So it's coming and running down our streets. It has all the oil on it. So we want to make sure we put enough vegetation out there that's helping to clean that product before it gets to the bay. That it's having that sort of nutrient. Sorry, there's an ant. I just can't take it anymore. Sorry. I'm still getting killed. There we go. The whole goal is to do everything we can to try and ensure the cleanliness of the bay itself. And so those are the steps that we are trying to do in the implementation of this when we develop property in the town of Cape Charles as a whole. So part of what I've talked to the state about, they have some grant funds under DEQ right now that would help us do the mapping that we need to get our map more consistent, more legible, more understandable for the public at large, so that we get the RPA properly mapped as we know it today, that we get the RMA showing according to how we may choose to define it in our ordinance and have that mapped appropriately on our map. Lastly, you're going to see some cross-hatching areas on this map down on the south side of the harbor, around the north side of the harbor a little bit. I know it's hard to see up at the Oyster Farm area, that marina up there, there's a little bit of cross-hatching up there as well. Can you zoom in on that, Jack? Would that help any? There you go, thank you. That's called an intensely developed area, or IDA, under the Chesapeake Bay Act. So when the Bay Act came in 1972, they recognized at the federal level that there was already development occurring across huge swaths of Bay Act implementation. Whether it's Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, all these states are involved in the Chesapeake Bay Act. That there's development already there, and they had to recognize that and say they get some exemptions and relief from having to comply with the Bay Act. And so every locality at the time of adoption was required to map what those areas were. So this town chose to map all around its harbor, whether there was development there or not. But what they felt was the intensely developed area, or the intent of the town to have intensely developed area. And so yes, that was meant not just for residential development, but more for your commercial development, especially those that are adjacent to the water. There is still an allowance under the Act today that we can still have intensely developed areas around the waterfront if it is water-dependent facilities. They get a clear exemption right now under the law. So for example, if we should have a clamming operation that processes clams again, a shucking house of some sort, that would be allowed to go anywhere around the harbor, whether it's in one of these crosshatch areas or not, just so you're aware of that. However, say a restaurant wants to be adjacent to the harbor. That is not a water-dependent facility. So they would have to still comply with the Bay Act, meaning they have to keep a distance of at least 100 feet from the RPA and put their establishment accordingly on their property, and with all the attendant landscaping and other buffer requirements we would require for such a facility to go there. So we cannot change the location of the IDA.
But if that was in the IDA, would they have to do that or not?
No, so
Okay.
right now, so when you look at the south side of the harbor, that puts the whole concrete plant in it. That puts the adjacent parcel next to the concrete plant, which has a big rock stone storage area right now. They're still looking to do more intensive development over there at the south end of the harbor. Been in conversations, they may look at some boat storage, they may look at some boat lifts, some additional boat repair stuff coming in. That picks up around the corner side, back side of the harbor, that picks up the yacht centers in there.
But they could put a restaurant there and not have to be compliant because it's in the IDA?
They'd have to comply with the underlying zoning ordinance, which at this point, as you guys know, we actually aligned our zoning ordinance to pick up, so again, the very south side, that is all now, the industrial plant is still the heavy, not the industrial plant, sorry, the concrete plant is still the heavy industrial. The lot next to it, along with the other adjacent lot, is light harbor, light industrial now. So a restaurant is not necessarily an allowable use anymore in those zoning districts. But as I work my way around, you're going to see a little bit of white before you make the whole corner there. I have been in some conversations with folks that would like to put a restaurant over there, which is between there's Hook and Harvey's over there, if you know, so I've hit the yacht center, then there's Hook and Harvey, then I've got now just boat storage in a random parking lot fashion right now. And then there's kind of a parcel that doesn't really have anything in it. There's a gazebo over there that not the yacht center, the yacht club, thank you, uses, things of that nature. I think there's been some conversations, can there be a restaurant somewhere back in that corner? And so I've talked to those property owners and interested parties. They would have to comply with the RPA. They'd have to be back 100 feet from the water's edge, and then they can have a restaurant.
Okay. That was my question. If it was in the IDA, they still got to be compliant. Okay.
Right.
But the shanty is in the IDA,
The shanty's in the IDA, but it was an existing, so it's an intensely developed area within that IDA concept and prospect. So it can stay there because
Right.
it was there before and the town had already identified it. But let's say I'm gonna pick that southern corner where it's in that white area. So if a restaurant wants to go in there, it's not in an IDA marked area, so it's not already identified as being heavily developed.
Right.
And it will have to comply with the Bay Act.
But there's more property in that crosshatched area there that's in the harbor district, and if they wanted to put a restaurant there because it's in the IDA, they could.
They could.
Okay,
Yes,
that's
that's
my
correct. So,
question.
so yeah, when you go around and start hitting the north side of the harbor, yes, the town had identified more of that. A lot of it was because of the railroad activity was over there back in the 70s, so a lot of that was that's why it got included. It benefits today from that inclusion. And it drives us all the way out to the old Tawby property as well. And I know everybody's going, how'd the Tawby property be? Well, at the time when this was done, there was an active clamming operation there, and shuck houses were back there. There used to be 4 buildings that I can remember on that property at one point in time that was in business, that was associated with water activity and heavily in use. Yes, it has changed over the years, it's vacant now, but it still has the benefit of having that designation. And of course, the marina to the north has that designation as well, so.
So, Katie, just to clarify one of the points you meant, you said that there is no construction, or that you can't touch an RPA? Like, there can be no development activity in an
You cannot
RPA?
develop the 50 feet seaward of the RPA.
Okay.
There's there's limited allowances. and
Right, because there's a
exceptions
whole section here that says development in RPAs.
For the 50-foot landward, yes.
So RPA and then 50-foot landward.
RPA is 100 feet.
Right.
Within that 100 feet, I got 50 feet seaward.
Right.
That's really clear, there's a big no.
Right.
The 50-foot landward, there are exceptions and allowances for stuff to happen there. It's limited, but there are allowances,
Right,
yes.
okay.
And there's a process outlined as to how you would have to pursue that, yes.
And, right, okay, and this, okay, right.
Okay?
Only if it's water dependent, and that goes to sort of
There's
what.
a whole bunch of stuff, yes.
Yeah, no, I can see, okay.
I just want to make sure, this is not normally what you guys deal with or talk about a lot, so sorry for if I'm educating you and you're already familiar with all of this, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same level playing field as we walk through the ordinance. Jim?
Does any of this sort of dovetail with the raft study that was done a good decade ago almost?
It does, but the raft study was to achieve a different objective.
Okay.
Theirs was really to see how the town was going to plan for what could be the 100-year storm.
Right.
How do we deal with those continual flooding events and rain events and then hurricanes and other things that are happening coming in from the water side of the equation, and trying to help us maybe address other infrastructure issues of our community.
Okay.
Whether that be through bulkheads, whether that be through improved stormwater management and stormwater drainage systems within our streets.
Right.
Maybe looking one day at requiring elevation of certain homes based upon a certain distance from where our flooding zones are. One of the interesting things, since for those who may not have been here, if you want to give a little background on RAFT, it's the Resiliency Adaptation Feasibility Tool that came out of 3 universities, which was UVA, Virginia Tech, somewhere else in Virginia.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we actually had it in this room, and this room was packed beyond capacity for that raft presentation and study. It was really very educational for all of us.
It really was the start of the state recognizing they really needed to focus different planning resources on events occurring. Again, I have to say, during the buzzwords of sea level rise and other considerations, that we're warming the earth, we're causing damage here, all sorts of things. And so part of this, it came out of that. It was the first pilot program out of this three university consortium. Cape Charles was one of the pilot programs. Northampton was in that pilot program, and one other community, I want to say it was Matthews County was in it, or somewhere over on the peninsula was in on it. And they started to help the localities think of things in a different way as to how you're building, where you should build, trying to really look at some of the data coming in on rain events, on the storm events, both the hurricane flooding, what is happening. Clearly, there is coastal erosion, there is beach erosion, whether those are coming from the earth warming up, who knows? We're not here to debate or question those findings. They're definitely a reality we are seeing, and how should we handle that as a community? Should we still allow certain buildings to go up? Or while we are not prohibiting residential development in all the places we've already identified for residential development, should we look at greater standards to elevate them, to require greater freeboard requirements if there is flooding events, meaning that things could wash through your lower first floor, if it's your first floor is really only your garage and storage space, things of that nature, not real living space. But one of the things that happened since the RAF study was completed and those results were provided to the town, FEMA remapped all of your flood zones, and most of the town came out of the flood zone. So it made some of our responses challenging, to say the least, because we're supposed to be writing responses and developing plans of action to ensure that we don't flood. But now we've just had the federal government tell us you don't flood under your insurance maps. And so that's made some of our planning objectives difficult to administer something, because right now if we go look for grant funding to try and put in some of these improvements or recommendations of building standards or things of that nature, they're going to go looking saying, what's your flood data? Where are you in the flood zone? And right now the answer is, we're not in the flood zone. And if you go actually poll claims for flooding, they are down in this community. They're not a substantiated claim to support that we have a flooding problem and that we have a coastal erosion problem, even though we think from a planning perspective, there is a high chance we will have some impacts of that to this community. So, everybody good so far?
Okay,
Yes.
are we, on the resiliency language that we need to address, are we ahead of other communities? Are we, can we learn a lot from other communities? Are we out in front on some of this stuff because you were the first audit that
Sure.
DEQ came and did?
From the state language, I'm not saying that we're the first locality to adopt the resiliency assessment language. The cities are further along in their progress, just because Virginia Beach, Norfolk, they have much higher stake in trying to protect their waterfront and the industries that are located there and how they're addressing all the flooding concerns that are very real. That especially Virginia Beach during these storms, some of these streets are wholly going under. And so they really have taken on some massive projects, and they've been a big pilot community for the Commonwealth. In terms of the localities of our size and counties that we're adjacent to doing this, we are the first community. We're the first ones that they're working with to get the model ordinance language incorporated into an ordinance and get it adopted. So yeah, we are right now taking the lead on getting the language up to speed at this point, the resiliency assessment piece. We're going to be one of the first communities to have included it in our documentation at this point. They have provided me checklists because they have worked in some pilot programs. DEQ has worked in 2 communities doing pilot programs. So we have some templates to work with in terms of checklists and how we use the assessment once it is done through a development plan. What do we do with that information? Because that's my question is, I can tell you go study this or go give me a plan. Then it comes into my office, what do I do with that plan? How am I supposed to enforce or implement it in some form or fashion? And so that was part of my meeting today with DEQ was about that. And so I don't quite have the answer for you yet because they said, you wrote it down, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, I was asking that because I get a little concerned when you're the guinea pig. You end up getting written the hardest set of rules without any learning, and then we have something that's almost impossible for this town to administer and handle.
Yes.
And so I was just,
And
was
that
my
has been one of
concern.
the key things in all of my conversations with DEQ at this point is we are limited in staff. We are not trained in this either. It is not the forte of any of our staff at this point. We're learning it, we're doing it. The education piece has got to be a huge component of what we're putting out here to the public at large. And it can't be difficult when there is staff turnover to administer it moving forward. So we've talked about all of those things, and I said, otherwise, give you another year or 2 years, you're gonna be back here telling that you guys are doing it wrong, because there's been a turnover of staff and they just don't know this stuff. And it's not the first thing you learn when you take on this job of being, you know, in planning and zoning. As Jack can attest, he's been here for 9 months, 10 months now? Almost a year tomorrow. Oh my Lord, I better celebrate.
Where's the cake?
I know. It's not the first thing he got learned, he was taught about when he took this job, and is probably just now coming here in the last 4 months that he's really been, you know, I've been hammering him hard about learning the Chesapeake Bay Act. Because there's so many other things you gotta learn when you start this job that you have to do. There's no way around that, so. I'm with you, I don't want us to be the guinea pig, but at some point, there's more than 30 Chesapeake Bay communities in Virginia, and again, there's also in Maryland and Delaware, up into New York and Pennsylvania. Granted, each state has their own little nuances to how they're administering this, so it's not like we are sitting alone trying to figure this out, but we actually do regional meetings, so that when I sit twice a year, I'm sitting with my cohorts from Maryland and Delaware. I can't say I've had Pennsylvania attendees at those. But we're learning from each other what is working, what is not working. So,
And Katie, just so when I'm reading this, I understand. For example, on there's a comment next to section 7.3 where the person says the town of Claremont is where I pulled this language from.
Yep.
So this model ordinance and these changes that we're going to be reviewing, is there sort of like are these recommendations or requirements that DEQ is drafting, and are they pulling this from sort of like state model
As I said,
ordinance, or are they pulling it from like different places like Claremont?
Sure. Claremont is a town in Virginia, and is actually one of their pilot programs that they tested on them first, believe it or not, some of this stuff. And so from that, the state developed a model ordinance that they released to all localities when the law change came in now in 2024.
Right.
Sorry. So Claremont is a little bit further along and say building out checklists, building out forms of implementation. And so all of that is continuing to be shared with us, because I'm asking those questions, because I don't want to create the wheel if I don't have to create the wheel. And yes, we are looking to where the model communities that they were using to help get to the model ordinance, for us to figure out what's best for us. Because there is some tempering of the language. This is not an absolute. It needs to be tailored to our needs too in this occasion.
Is that model ordinance available on the DEQ website?
Yeah, I actually gave it to you last fall.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Oh, yeah, we can
Okay.
provide it to you again.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Because that's what I sent out, was what you did back in October 1.
Right.
When I gave you the model ordinance then, and had made some suggestions of ways we could tailor it to our community. That's the document I sent to DEQ and said, use this as the jumping off point to now comment to see what else we need to tweak or change or incorporate to address the new regulations, because that was the piece that had not been finished when we got the model ordinance. Okay? So we can definitely shoot you that link again, so you have it right in your hands from October 1. Okay?
Thanks.
So those are some of the key things we're trying to solve in this process, whatever. So that is the map we have. As I said, I've talked to DEQ. I just need to answer a few questions to figure out how much grant money I might need. And the end result of the product we're trying to get, then hopefully we'll get the funds and we can start getting this map for us into a GIS product. That is the goal, is to eventually get this so it integrates into a GIS software package for us. So I just want to make you aware of the various steps involved here. So with that said, I'm going to walk us through, and because I was with DEQ today, I have to be honest, I was going through the ordinance with them again, and I think I left the first 5 pages behind, but I don't think I had any edits on the first 5 pages. You guys can tell me if I did. So I ended up starting to talk with them about section 7.3, so I'll go back. Do you have any questions, comments, or items you want to discuss in 7.1? Or 7.2? Otherwise, I'm going to start us right in 7.3. Everybody good there? So which is areas of applicability. So this is the first key area where I talked about the RPA. And so yes, you're going to see under number 4, these are all the 1, 2, 3, and 4 under there, under A, that talk about all the areas and features that make up what is part of what I have to consider for RPA consideration. I gave you the quick and dirty from, just from the Chesapeake Bay side, but again, if I'm looking at the creek side of things, there may be other features that I have to consider. So it may not be as simple as saying, oh, it's from the shoreline, the average median shoreline where I'm having the high water mark show up. It may have tidal wetlands features that I've got to consider in. It may have non-tidal wetlands that I've got to consider. There may be other vegetated buffer that throws me into that in the wetlands area. So it's a little more nuanced. I just gave you a quick and dirty to give you a quick idea of how you're going to think about the RPA. The next one down, B, is really the one I want us to spend a little bit of time on, the resource management area. As I said, right now we've been using features which include floodplains, highly erodible soils, including steep slopes, highly permeable soils, non-tidal wetlands, not included in the RPA, and other lands necessary to protect the quality of state waters. So those are all things that we're supposed to be determining. Do they exist on the land? What are they? Map them for people? No. That's all I can tell you, no. That is not a skill set that your staff has. Just putting it out there candidly. Could we send this out to a third party to do? We probably could. We could track this out and have that happen for us. That takes time into a development calendar. And I do mean that from a private person's point of view. So that's going to get added in potentially another 4 to 8 weeks of building that into the calendar of saying, okay, you submit, you want to build a house, and you're down on pick Cherrystone Creek. And I know there's RPA over there. There's probably going to be RMA over there as well. So that could be another 8 weeks added to your schedule when you submit your plan to my office before we can tell you, have you achieved zoning clearance? I would rather not build that much of a lag time from when a plan comes in to when they might get an answer from my office. That's a long time. So the solution, and I've talked about this with DEQ, so they gave us some language for this, and yes, this is how it's been handled in another community that they're working with, is instead of defining the RMA by features, we just set a minimum of 100 feet in width landward of the RPA. So if we find that there is RPA on your property, then from that we will just do a simple measurement of 100 feet. And there's the RMA. What does that mean? So right now you've heard all the things you can or can't do potentially in the RPA. We haven't really talked about the RMA. The whole idea is there is no concrete absolute rules under the state law of what you can or cannot build in the RMA. It is meant to have buildings. It can have a home. It can have the deck of the home. It can have the driveway of the home. We're trying to encourage that they do put in plantings, that they do put in things that will help with the filtration, that will help clean the water as it heads back into the watershed. So they are not as rigid, but they are looking for assistance from the locality. If there's RMA, then they do want some action from us to not have fully impervious surfaces all over that lot that encompasses the whole RMA. So they don't want you paving it crazy. They don't want you putting cinder blocks down or concrete blocks down or paving stones down where the water can't penetrate into the ground at all. So it is going to be working with our community to make sure they understand why we have the Chesapeake Bay Act, what's its intent and purpose, and how we were trying to encourage more reasonable land development to only do the minimum amount necessary for what you're trying to use your property for. Put the house in. Live up to whatever sizes we establish as the minimum or maximum house sizes. Put in a driveway if that's what you want. Maybe you're not going to get a driveway that fits 90 cars. Maybe you're only going to get a driveway for the 2 cars you need. And if you're going to have guests coming to your house, we choose a different way to mark where they're going to pay or park on your driveway that isn't just asphalt or flat out pavement. So it is working with the developer, the property owner, in trying to make more reasonable choices to keep as much environmental water flow occurring on your property as possible.
So in a case like that, would shells be better, or,
Shells would be better, yes.
so that's what we would encourage them to
We would encourage that. We can work with the property owner about different types of permeable pavers. There are ways to have some penetration of rain through what you think is just a regular paver, but actually it can come down to the groundwater. We may recommend larger stones for your driveway versus the small, tight, compact stones that really, once they get compacted in with the cars, you can't get any water through. So there are ways that we do work with the property owners today, trying to encourage that this would get to a more defined RMA, and then there would be requirements associated with that. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute and have you guys weigh in on what you think between having a defined feature of the RMA versus a distinct measurement of RMA.
And just to your point, Libby, if you look in the definition of impervious cover, it speaks to shell surface. I don't know if that's crushed shells or, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it is that.
It is crushed shells.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be impervious cover.
Well, depending, well, I'm going to back up. Depending on the size of your crushed shells, it gets classified as impervious, or depending on how you crush the shells, it could be pervious.
Right.
So the devil's in the details of
The
this.
majority
Yes.
of them are broken shells, they're not crushed.
Yes,
And the
So
difference
they're very
is,
permeable,
okay.
yes.
they're not powder.
They're not powdered, that's correct. They don't get to the
Not
point where they
powder.
get so compact
Water
that you
does
can't-
go through
Yeah,
them.
yeah. No, they have, that's what they have, like the, sort of like on the trails on the golf, on the cart paths on the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so a lot of
Yeah.
homes in Bay Creek have
Right.
that stuff too.
So Katie, if we look at the town,
Yep.
places that we are planning to do development that are near the RPA, so that if we went 100 feet in on the RMA, would be areas along Plantation Creek and Bay Creek.
Yep. So let's
I'm really trying to figure out how much isn't already built.
It's
Yeah.
a great question.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of that is on Plantation Creek, that's Creekside. A lot of that's not built yet. We don't have homes over there yet fully. There are still subdivisions to come in southern Bay Creek that have not even been platted yet. I'm gonna bring this north for a minute, the Colony, which is right along the beachfront and across, a big portion of that is in the RPA and in RMA potentially. So not all of those lots have a structure on them at this point in time. And it's really important to know, while the Colony, that was one of the earlier Bay Creek subdivisions, it came on 2002, 2003, it's starting to get platted. The RPA does not actually get locked in, just because the subdivision got created. The RPA gets locked in when a development plan is advanced per lot for a subdivision. And what does that mean? When you want to build a home,
Yeah.
that's when you're going to come up and you're going to have to give me a site plan, you're going to have to go measure the RPA. Because why? Why didn't this town say, well, I'll take it all for 2003? Because the coast changes. The line changes all the time. And one of the things that has happened, the breakwaters have helped various aspects of what is coastal concern on this community. Some of it is the wave action into our harbor. That was a big reason why the breakwaters were put in out in the bay over here. It's also had an impact on the size of the beach. In, say, the Colony, for example, they've lost quite a bit of their beach as a result of those breakwaters. They have U's. If you go look at the aerial map, flip us over to the that Virginia map. There you go. And go up, if you can, up to the Colony. You see all those inlets up there? They've got little U beaches now. They've lost quite a bit of their beaches. Granted, their developer put in those breakwaters after seeing the impact and results of what was going on for the rest of the town. At that time, it was Dickie Foster put in those breakwaters for that very purpose, was to kind of slow the tidal actions coming in onto that shoreline. But it definitely changed the shoreline, because it's not just a flat, straight line of shore anymore. It's now a U where all those breakwaters are. And so if I go measure that today, yes, it's a different RPA measurement onto your property. So some of those homes that came in early, as you can see, easily fit on here. Others are really tight and compact and are pushed closer towards the road than they are towards the beach side of things at this point in time. So if I look at the north end, I think those are the earlier ones that came on. Go all the way up to the top where the restaurant is, Jack. Yeah. Some of those have a nice view right close to the beach side of things. Others, as you come further down at the south side of Sunset Boulevard at the Colony, scroll us on down a little bit, there you go. They've been pushed further towards the shore, the road itself, to avoid being in the RPA. In that particular case, what are we doing about that? It actually is the responsibility of the Bay Creek Homeowners Association. They own that beach, and they are going to be adding sand and rebuilding that beach here over the next year. They've gotten all their permits, and that's a project that should be starting sometime late summer, early fall for them.
So if we went and used a 100-foot RMA, looked at the few empty lots that are right on the beach in the Colony, my guess is 200 feet gets you from mean high tide water, gets you at least halfway up their lots.
Right.
And so a good piece of where they want to put their houses in the RMA, and those houses tend to
In the
fill.
RPA.
Well, no, because
Right.
I'm saying 200 feet.
200 feet, so sure, you're picking up, yes, it's gonna be RMA, it doesn't mean they can't have their house. They can have their house in the RMA.
So you would approve a house that fills up 90% of that lot with a driveway. How would you be able to meet those RMA requirements if a house is taking all of that? That's not very permeable, I don't think.
Sure.
And then a little bit of a driveway, because there isn't much. You reach out the window and you shake your neighbor's hands on some of those huge houses going in there. So I just want to make sure that if we go to the 100 feet, is there something that's going to allow those people to actually build
Yes.
homes?
So again, you can still build a home in the RMA, that's not prohibited. Where the state has come down, again, they are not crystal clear. They have allowed discretion for each locality. They will come back with a comment, what is required for a home to be a home? And so I ask that to all of you, what would be required for a home to be a home? Answer me, if you got an answer. What do you need in the home? You need the four walls. Again, it needs to be within whatever is the defined square footage that is allowed, either minimum or maximum, under your zoning ordinance. And so yes, we have those requirements. What is unique about Bay Creek is they have an additional layer of design requirements. That is not zoning. I have to adhere and enforce the zoning ordinance. So for example, this is in the PUD R2, if I remember correctly. So a minimum house size up there is, I should know this one off the top of my head, 1,200 square feet under design requirements, and we are observing that, and that's under the, I know.
In the Colony?
However,
I don't think that.
their larger one is much, much larger.
I can't believe it's 1,200.
Part of it is, because that's what's still in their PUD, is what is the minimum and maximum allowed. And the design requirements have changed now. I think they've been revised at least 3 times that I'm aware of in the last decade.
I know they've changed those, and they've
Yes.
dropped the requirement on the square footage. Several, in some cases, a couple hundred square feet. So, but I can't believe it's 1,200 as a minimum.
In the original,
Maybe the minimum.
in the original PUD, it is, I think it's 1,200, Josh, I'm trying to find it now for you, I don't know. Anyway, so part of that is part of the challenge is zoning has a different standard than, say, the design requirements. And so this is where we've had some negotiation over the last 2 years, because we actually did have 2 lots at the far north end that had not been built on yet, that came forward with a development plan to put a house in there. And based upon the size of the house that they wanted, which I'm not talking the number of elevations they wanted, the number of stories they wanted, the base square footage, yes, was coming in around 4,600 or so. And when you measure the RPA and then put that size house in its 4 corners there, I couldn't fit it. I could not get it done. And I said, you guys need to come down to like 3,800 square feet in your house. What do you think was the reaction to that?
Hell no.
So, there was some extreme anger over being told they can't have the largest house that they really wanted there. But we had to work through that with the Bay Creek Design Committee, the ARC, to reach those negotiations with the property owner. There were ways that they could alter the design of the house that maybe could have given them the square footage they wanted, but it may not have been the right square that they wanted. So it was probably a rough 5 months of negotiation of me back and forth with all these parties trying to figure out how do you comply with this law. To date, not one single lot has been declared undevelopable up there. I have found a solution all the way through. It may not be you were walking away with the 9,000 square foot home you want. Maybe you had to come down to 7,600 square feet. That's still a home. Under the state's perspective and under the law, that's a home. Attached garages have to be considered within that footprint. If you have a detached garage, that's not an essential element of a home under the state law. So you may want to put a garage on your property potentially. That may be jettisoned off if you were asking it to be a separate structure from the house, just to make you aware. Decks are not necessarily an essential feature of a home. We may all think they are, porches and decks and things of that nature, not under the state law and what has gone to court over these things. Pools, not even close to being an essential feature of a home. So this all comes down to what is required for a home. For you to have a home and live in, that is what is going to be the standard of which we determine, is that a reasonable request to ask us to put in for a development plan. Clear as mud, right? Just want to make sure everybody's understanding. There's a lot of nuance in how we administer this law, and we are doing the best we can to try and find a solution for every property owner moving forward. Yes, have there had to be some give and take here? Absolutely. So as we go through this, so who else would be impacted? So we're going to stay just here in this section of the town, the north end.
Well, the houses over there in Marina Village East that are building over there on Kings Creek.
They're impacted, yes.
Matter
So,
of fact,
go ahead.
there was one person that that did some cutting all the way down to the water.
Yeah. So you would think all around those water features, those lakes, no, they're your stormwater ponds for Bay Creek. They were designed and built that way for the Bay Creek development. So all of those lake features that you're seeing right now, they are not RPA, they're not RMA. There is one distinction, and Bill just referenced it, in Marina Village East, on the far, what is that, east side? Yeah, the far side, there is a wetland stream, and there's a creek that actually goes all the way up, stretches into the backside of the marina up there. The oyster marina, whatever it's called. I apologize for not remembering the exact name. So there are some of these properties that are on this right side of Marina Village East that are in RPA, that we have features that we have to pay attention to because of that. Those features of both, there's a creek feature and there's some wetlands features that I got to factor in here too. But for the most part, most of that is not in RPA consideration. So as we then head south, most of the town of Historic District falls out of the Chesapeake Bay for the whole. It will get impacted for RMA in some cases, but there's nothing that's building close to the bay itself. There's the whole distance of the beach itself, then we have all of Bay Avenue before you start having residences. We are trying to impose some standards of pervious and impervious coverage, because we recognize flooding is a factor in this community, and we're trying to encourage people to not pave over everything, because actually having vegetation on your land is useful to resolve some of the flooding issues that are occurring in our community. So, go ahead.
So, just to get this off the table, and I think you just answered my question. So this will in no way impact separate discussions that are taking place on the beachfront master plan? Okay.
And with that said, those consultants are in communication with the state agencies as they start to figure out what will be the solutions proposed and features put in for the beachfront master plan to ensure compliance with the Chesapeake Bay Act, with those other acts that govern this. And I say this because there's also the Coastal Sand Dune Act, the state has it, the town has adopted as well. But that beach was man-made,
Right.
so it has a lot of, get me out of jail free cards, sorry, to some extent. Okay, so as I move southward, let's see if I can remember all this, Jeff.
So you're saying though that those lots on like Bridgeton there in Marina Village East with that stream behind it,
Some of them are going to have it.
I mean,
So again,
if you
that-
come 100 feet off of that stream, there's
Yeah.
very little buildable footprint left there,
But-
right?
But you can actually see that was a known feature when the developer was doing this, because when you go look at those developments, go look at the trees. Again, scroll into Marina Village East, Jack. Going down, you see how a lot of them have a whole natural forest that's grown back there?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, when you start to map it, that's been almost to the 100-foot RPA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
okay.
You can get homes on those lots. There are a couple at the northern end that are getting a little tricky,
Yeah.
So that tree line is 100 feet
Just
from the
about,
RPA?
just about.
Wow. Okay.
100 feet's not, it's not like 100 yards, remember? It's
Yeah,
like-
yeah, yeah, no, 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 I know, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
30 yards, 33 yards.
there you
33
go.
yards. Yeah.
So, okay, so again, as I head to the south part of town into Bay Creek that way again, because again, Bay Creek is impacted a lot by the Chesapeake Bay Act. So again, everything around fairways, that's not, those are again part of your stormwater pond system that manages stormwater for Bay Creek as a whole, but definitely around Cherrystone Creek. So as I go over to that side, Jack,
Plantation.
Plantation Creek, sorry, Cherry.
Cherrystone Creek is way up.
No, I'm
Not way up,
thinking
but it's on the other, it's the north of Kings Creek.
Creekside, there's the,
Yeah.
Creekside Lane.
there's the name of it, it'll come to me eventually, sorry. Creekside Lane, a lot of their properties are in it, all the way down to the Point. The Point definitely is in it with RPA considerations. And there are, I think there's 3 lots down there, or 4 lots down there. that can be
Inherent
built.
Point.
No,
Yeah.
Plantation.
Oh,
Yeah,
Plantation
Plantation
Point.
Point.
Sorry.
But you're right, then as we move our way across, go down some a little bit. Whoa,
Ooh, just flip that.
I don't know either, now we're upside down.
I didn't feel that.
Did you feel that one? Anyway, you guys know Bay Creek at this point, so let's see if I can get through it. So the new subdivision of Murfield Village, anything that was on those cliffs that are the cliffs of Murfield, as we call it, they're in the RPA. And so we've had to deal with that consideration.
How
Wait
are
a
they in
second,
the
how could they
RPA?
be in the RPA?
There's a
There's-
fairway.
There's a fairway and
I understand that. So there were some considerations that we had to do as to how we set people back from that. They were easy to accommodate. That's all I can tell you. They were very easy to accommodate those little areas.
So if that's the case,
Yeah.
then all those houses on Carousel Place that are almost on, up to the dune in some cases, they're not in the RPA?
Some were, some weren't. Again, we had to make accommodations when that happened. Yes.
Okay, well,
So I'm not saying that they're wholly in the RPA. They may have had some land touching. That was RPA that pushed back where they could develop things.
but you,
And with that said, I know since I've been here down in that area of Bay Creek, I had to say no to a pool. House was fine. I had to say no to the pool. One had to redesign the pool feature to get in there. So as I said, there are ways to accommodate so far just about every issue that's come forward.
But you haven't had to deal with the RMA yet.
No.
No.
So the question is, if you go to one of those houses that you just approved and said the house was fine and the pool was fine,
Yeah.
when we go to an RMA, are we gonna change, you know, what, do we know what rules we apply in
Yeah,
that
the
case?
criteria for the RMA.
So that is what is more nebulous for me still from the state, is trying to get them to define the RMA better for us to figure out, I'm not saying a rigidity, but a more defined criteria of evaluation. I don't have it. I'm not sure I'm gonna get it from them either. They want us to encourage, as little pervious coverage on a lot as needed. They only want the minimum amount needed. Do they define what the minimum amount is? Not exactly. So one of the other things I've been pondering with DEQ, talking with DEQ about, now talking with my immediate boss, the town manager over this. I think I will be coming forward and proposing a zoning text amendment for our consideration later this summer, where we actually define pervious and impervious coverage, not just with a definition, but then set a criteria standard of no more than 55% of a lot has impervious coverage. And that includes not only structures, but all your hardscaping within that. At some point, we have to get serious of defining what that is if we want to address some of these other ancillary impacts when you start to pave over everything. And as I mentioned, a big part of that is we are seeing the flooding concerns. I'm not saying it's all associated with that. When a heavy rainfall comes, There's not going to stop most of these streets from flooding. But what then matters is how long does it take it to drain when the rain stops? And that's what we're looking at as well, so.
So just to Ian's point, and just again, so I'm clear, so there is a definition here of RMA. It's very broad.
Yep.
It's anything that's not an RPA. Right? And then it gives you some examples. I mean, anything that can result in the degradation of water quality.
Yes. But a part of what we're trying to do is define that to a measurement size.
Right.
I am proposing that we put in a definition of RMA that defines it as a minimum of 100 feet in width landward of the RPA, whichever is greatest. Which, in this point, I'm going to say get rid of the greatest because I don't want to consider all the features. I just want to do it from a pure measurement piece.
I get
Yes.
that. Yeah, and then the second point is also the state has not been very forthcoming in criteria for development in the RMA.
Right. There are no rules prohibiting development in the RMA. There are
Right.
none.
Right.
So that's all I can tell you.
So
is
it's just a measurement thing.
it's a
then.
measurement, and then they want us to try and encourage best practices to the benefit of our community. Yes.
Okay.
And my community may have different needs than, say,
Right.
Saxis, which, for those who know Saxis at the north end in Accomack County, they have real flooding problems. We think we do, Saxis is even worse. So their ways of solution may be different than what our solutions are. That's all I'm trying to say to you.
And
Is
this
the state is trying to give us the flexibility to tailor upon our actual conditions.
could change, right, depending upon administrations or whoever is in control of DEQ in Richmond, right?
The RMA has been part of the Chesapeake Bay Act since its inception in
Right.
1972. The specificity or criteria or conditions of what can happen in the RMA have not changed in
Oh.
that time frame.
Oh, okay.
They just are trying to encourage, as the science gets
Okay.
better and better,
Okay.
to really
Best
have the
practices.
localities implement best practices.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm gonna, for those who, you may hear this term thrown out, BPs, use BMPs all the time, BMPs are not ponds, they're best management practices. Just so you understand that terminology, you're gonna hear it a lot as we start talking more about coastal resiliency over the next year plus with you guys. When I talk about BMPs, that's what it means, is best management practices. It has nothing about a stormwater pond whatsoever, just so you know that. Okay?
So I started with the question on that. I think the 100-foot probably fits this community better than trying to go down and use option 1 that she has written in here that describes highly permeable soils, blah, blah, blah. Because I could probably make a case somebody who was a stickler could get 80% of the town in an RMA if they really tried to, looking for one single word and making their own adjustment. I think from what I see here, it would be really hard not to think that 100 feet in off any of these RPAs is probably would fit into an RMA under these definitions. So I think keeping it simple
Certainty.
I would agree with
uh,
that.
Yeah, I
makes
agree
no
with that
sense.
as well.
Yeah,
I would agree with that as well.
yeah.
That thrills me to know that you have no idea. This is a big chunk of what I needed to talk to you guys about. So I know we're on a lovely, summer afternoon, evening at this point. Are you good to keep going at this point? We're an hour into this. Are you okay to keep going, or do you want us to take a break here? Because this is a big chunk of what I need to get you guys through tonight. So, we happy to keep going a little bit further? Okay, I'm going to. There are Notes I've made along the way, so I wrote on the side, everything that's in the box from the Word document, that came from the state. Just so you know, there are various staffers at the state that offer their comments coming in. I've tried to address how I think we should handle these, but happy to hear if you have any further questions or issues of how we should address these. If not, I'm going to keep on working our way down.
Wait,
Go
you're
ahead.
referring to C and D, Katie?
Yeah, B, C, and D in that whole
Okay.
area.
Right. Just real quick, refresh your memory on IDAs and what the rules would be around an IDA?
Intensely developed areas.
Right.
So again, under the, here's the definition, can I read it past it? So
Yeah.
it deals with water quality dependent facilities. So again, we had this conversation, actually more than you would think in my office with Jeb and myself over this, trying to verify this.
Concentrated and little of the natural environment remains.
Right. So let's start, let me throw out another example. One of the conversations we've had is boat storage a water dependent facility?
No.
I'm letting you guys tell me your thoughts on it. heard
I
no
don't have a
from Jim.
boat. so
Boat
I-
storage.
Boat storage?
In what aspect?
Yeah, in what
Boat
capacity?
mooring
Are
or
you
boat
talking-
storage?
Boat storage.
Like a boatel.
Like a
Boat
motel?
hotel.
House behind me has no water nearby.
So,
Couple big boats there.
so I throw that out as an example. Do you have a different opinion, Clayton?
Well,
Go ahead.
if it's just boat storage where you can park your trailer, that's one thing. If it's the type of boat storage that they have throughout the southeast where they lift your boat out of the water and they store it vertically, then
Hotel.
it needs to be adjacent to the water, otherwise that is not functional.
Are there others that can be located maybe half a mile from the water, providing that same thing? So you go store your boat for the winter. Does it have to be in a facility that is right adjacent to the water?
No, right now I go to Webster, which is not
There you go.
adjacent to the water.
So those are some of the conversations that we
Right.
continue to have in my office as we talk with property owners and how they might want to develop. What business interests are they considering at property? They're not clear answers. They are this sort of conversation that we have with them is, well, you can park a boat, as we clearly know, all the way at the Meatland property. Happening all the time right now. That's okay.
I can do one up at Cape Center.
At the Cape Center, and any number of spots, so not necessarily. Is your boat storage in anticipation of repair? And your repair needs to be adjacent to the water for testing or for whatever reasons need to be. That gets to the nuance of some things, just so you're aware of the differences. So I can't say with definitiveness, the IDA cannot have a boat storage facility.
Right.
It depends. Depends on the type of boat storage it may be associated with. Okay, just to give you some examples. There is never a clear cut, this is the rule and everybody's gonna follow it. We end up in very detailed conversations with the property owners to figure out exactly what they're doing, to see, is there a way that this would qualify to be in the IDA, or there's just no way I can twist themselves to meet that pretzel. Okay? So, I don't know if I answered your question, Bill, but I'm trying my best to make sure I'm having you understand how challenging this law is to administer.
Well, and
Yeah.
it requires that even if so there is development allowed in the IDA, but you have to meet these erosion and sediment control requirements.
Yes.
Right.
So for example, I've heard now several different pitches since I've been here at the town in the last 3 years for projects that could happen on the old Tobby property on Mason Avenue. Each time I have run these by DEQ as well. I want to make sure that we're not running afoul, because that's the other thing I haven't really talked about in here. When you run afoul of this law, who gets in trouble? The town first. Because we are administering this law on their behalf. So if we get it wrong and the state finds us in violation of it, they're gonna come after us with the penalties first. Which in turn means I need to then, with the town's blessing, go after the property owner and enforce our violations for them at that point. So that's why I do take a very conservative viewpoint. When I'm seeing development plans coming forward, I'm on the phone with DEQ staff talking to them at the same time. So some of the development plans I've seen for that property are heavy residential. It could be a mix of a hotel with condo units associated with it. I have talked to them about that. they would find that as an exception under the Chesapeake Bay Act within the IDA, since that is an IDA identified property. Yes, we would have to do appropriate landscaping and some other features to accommodate that, to try and address the IDA exceptions allowed for development there, but it could happen.
Okay. And as we have just sort of created a definition of the resource management area, is that part of what the state is asking us as well, to sort of develop new, to re-identify IDAs in town, or is that pretty much, that's done?
The IDA is locked down. It
That's
cannot
locked
be
down.
changed.
Okay.
Because again, there was that one shot of window when the law came in, you were allowed right then to do your snapshot.
I see, okay,
And
thank you.
there's no allowance to move the snapshot.
Okay.
I think
So how-
when we worked on the comp plan, we wrote into that 25% green space for both the former rail yard and the former Tavik property. Did we not?
I think
Yeah.
so, but I can't remember.
I
We
thought
did,
we did.
we
Yeah,
did.
yeah. I think we did, because
Yeah.
I do remember that, yeah.
Because again, as you saw on our map from the Chesapeake Bay mapping, most of the railroad property didn't have this designation, does not have the IDA crosshatching
No, it
over it.
doesn't.
No.
Right.
So, there's some of it, yes, it's in it, but not all of that railroad property has that designation.
So previously, you said, though, that like a restaurant wouldn't be a permitted use within the IDA, and yet somehow something residential, like a hotel or condominiums, could be? How would that?
No, she said a
It's,
restaurant
because
is.
the IDA is an overlay
can
district,
be.
you still have the underlying zoning district that has to have those uses allowed.
I got you.
So, for example, on
On the
the
other
north
side, you could not.
That
I
is
got you.
harbor commercial. It does have those uses allowed
I got you.
in that commercial activity. Whereas the south side, say where the concrete plant is, that's heavy industrial.
I got you.
No, there's not gonna be a restaurant there. That's what our zoning ordinance says. There are certain uses we've said no to the underlying zoning district. The Chesapeake Bay is an overlay, just like the historic district is an overlay across the town. Otherwise, it's all, not all of it, but primarily R1 in those areas of the historic district. We adhere to the R1 requirements first. The overlay sits on top of it. It is the more stringent requirements. It means if those are more stringent than what's in, say, the R1 district, I've got to adhere to the more stringent requirements, okay? So,
Katie, you've got something here that talks, it's a comment from one of your folks, CM2R1, the second one there. If the boundaries of an RMA include only a portion of a lot or parcel, the entire lot or parcel shall comply with the requirements of the overlay district. We've got some very large lots around the harbor that are going to be in our 100-foot setback that I assume go way further back, you know, are much
Right.
larger. There's some get out of jail words they talk about putting in there. I would suggest we look at the get out of jail words to make development easier and your job easier in the future to put that in there.
and thank you for saying that. That is one of the key points that we would have to reach a decision on. Now that we've said we're gonna do this from a measurement perspective, now is, okay, we've got it here, it only covers 70% of the lot. Do we wanna just go ahead and make the entire parcel based upon our parcel boundary descriptions versus this measurement alone? So if the RMA encompasses whether it's some percentage, or we just say if you have any of the RMA that hits on your lot, then all the lot's gonna fall under that requirement. That's a conversation we need to have as well. So that's the next big question for you guys. I mean, you may need to think about this. Now that we reach this one milestone, okay, now we start thinking about it. So let's go hit one of our larger parcels around the harbor for a minute. I'm gonna pick on them. They may not exactly meet my definition, but we're just gonna give you an example. So let's go do the gun property to the south, go down a little bit. Okay, so the big stony, sandy area right there. That's owned by Jim Gunn. He's in an IDA, portion of this is not in the IDA. So as I get to where the boat storage is occurring up at the little northern piece of that property, not all of that sits in the IDA. So, big chunk of RPA, yes, is going to happen, then RMA would happen on that property. But that property goes all the way back close to the lot line, where you see more boat storage over there. So do I have the RMA extend all the way to where that second boat storage is occurring over there with the green area? I know I'm not giving good definitions. I hope everybody sees what I'm talking about. Thank you, Jack. Yes. Or do we say, nope, the RMA is just from that measurement of 100 feet and that's that, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles, and the office staff will have to work on a development plan with that measurement in mind all the time. So, not every lot is gonna have those challenges, because most of our lots in the residential are small. They're 5,600 square feet for the most part in our residential areas. It is definitely in these commercial areas, in these industrial areas, where you're having different size lot configurations. There is no minimum lot size in most of our commercial or industrial properties. So, like, I'm gonna hit the railroad property, some of that, right now, I wouldn't want to have the whole RMA stretch out, because that's just one giant parcel right now. So, but as we start to figure out what should that harbor railroad property look like for development, it's going to get carved up. And so then we start to think, okay, the ones that are nearer to the harbor, do we want to have that standard? Or do we just use what we've just defined, which is the 100 RPA and then the 100 RMA, bam, that's it. So 200 feet is all we're going to put under these protections.
I think that makes your job much easier, just having the first option that we voted on. It would seem like if we're sort of creating more type of because again, we still don't know what the criteria is
Right.
for development on an RMA, and now we're sort of moving it out into additional properties.
Right.
It's going to be more work for you. That's going to be more uncertainty to people who want to develop on things that don't even fall within the 200-foot.
Right. And I'm not
Buffer.
saying I actually am recommending one versus the other. It really is a conversation we need to have at this
Right.
point. Just think about it. Because you're right, some of it's going to get easy from when a plan of development comes in. What do I want to put on this lot? What are my structures? What are my buildings? What are all my parking areas, etc. I'll hit this as a commercial project first. So say they want to have a restaurant, I don't know, a decent sized restaurant that's 40 tables roughly. So a portion of that may fall into the RMA, RPA area, so we keep the restaurant, we back it up a little bit, so it's out of the RPA, we
Right.
still can get the building in, but it's in the RMA, that's okay. And then they then decide, well, we want to now add a tiki bar, we want to add some outdoor seating, so now we're going to expand the restaurant, because it was so successful, we're now going to grow it even further. It's the growth pieces that start to get funky of trying to remember, is that in the RMA? Not in the RMA. How are we supposed to be dealing with it? It's still the same parcel. How do we treat it? Not easily, it can be done, it's just management of their site plan and how it gets developed and keeping those rules clear. And for me, as long as it's clear in the zoning ordinance, easy to do. And I can tell you up till now, the features piece was not clear for me. So moving right now, just making that decision alone, and hopefully the council will support that change of this ordinance, makes my life a lot easier, staff's life a lot easier in how we look at development plans coming in.
Keeping it at the 200.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for instance, the former Tavi property?
Yes.
If we have it, tape measure and we go 100 feet from the water line towards Mason. How much of that, what is it, 15 acres, could actually be developed?
actually most of it, because it is an
Because
IDA.
it's in the IDA, Jim.
It's in the IDA, it's cross-hatching all over it.
been
Yeah,
basically
Safe.
Okay,
it's all the way in it.
but that also
It's already achieved its exception to this law.
It actually has the seawall there too.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, if everybody's good with that, then I'm gonna ignore their staff comments on the side and say, no, we're gonna leave this at this benchmark of 100 feet for RMA, that's
Yep.
it, period.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's agreed.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I just go back a little bit? Earlier you said, what is a home or what is a house? And we were talking about those colony lots in there. I
Yeah.
mean, are we saying that by doing this, we could end up restricting, like there could be a 5,000 square foot house and then the lot next to it could only basically build a 1,200 square foot house? or-
Not as a result of the RMA
Okay,
refined definition, no.
okay.
Because again, The issue of the definition of what is a house really resides in, is the RPA lapping over your land of where you
Right.
wanted to build your home?
Right.
So I'm gonna pick on the Colony again. So they're similar in size of say, I won't say 40 by 140, but let's put one of our town lots all the way up at the Colony area, 40 by 140. So what's happening up there is, so you've got your setback already from your back, and we do consider the bay the back. Believe me, that's your rear yard. So you gotta come in, say 20 feet from there, and that's fine. We now map the RPA for them. That may end up being, coming up, it encroaches 50 feet into your backyard. So we already had the 20, you couldn't build in anyway because of the rear setback. Now I've added another 30 you can't build in because of the RPA. That still leaves you quite a bit of land.
Right.
You had a 140-foot lot depth. I've only whacked off 110. Granted, you got some front yard setback you're going to have to accommodate, but you still have quite a bit that you can build a house in. The issue now comes, okay, not only do I want my house, I still want my deck, I want my patio, I want a pool, and I want the shed, and a greenhouse. You may not get those other latter things. So
Gotcha.
far, we've been able to work out a way to handle of moving the house forward a little bit, going to seek a potential variance if need be from some of your other setback requirements, and still getting them the deck that they were looking for, figuring out a different type of material for a patio. So we didn't have them do the concrete, we went into a pervious pavement system for patios. Maybe they didn't get their shed, didn't get their pool, but we have found the ways for everything else. But is a pool required for a house? No. Is the shed required for the house? You may think so, but no, from the state perspective. So, there are ways
Gotcha.
to deal with that. You could accommodate, say, some of your storage and shed issues is you may have to do an attached garage, because that then gets to be considered part of the footprint of your house, and you can build your storage within that garage setting. There are ways to try and get around that. You have to be creative, and part of it is having a really thorough conversation, not only with the property owner, but their developer, and in this case with the Bay Creek development folks, to really go through those nuances and changing a few things. Sometimes it means you gotta slightly alter the standard of home you're trying to get there.
Are the pervious coverage requirements over there the same as they are like in the historic district of like, what is it, you said 55 or?
They have requirements. They are leaning upon my office to really be the enforcement arm of some of these things.
Gotcha.
So, okay. I think
Thank
that
you.
covers everything under areas of applicability. Okay. I'm now going to move us to the next page. I'm sorry there weren't page numbers on this.
That was page 135.
Okay, yeah. Then things got bumped as they started to put edits and text changes in.
Okay,
So I'm going to bring us to 7.6.
Interested, but for
that's
some
the next
reason I
page.
can't connect this computer
Section
to the internet,
7.6
so
is up
flying
next.
blind here.
So again, it talks about where you can have development in the RPA. This is important to know, just so you're aware of it. As I said, there are very limited exceptions to what can happen in the RPA. One, if it's water dependent. So here's a great example. If you want to put in a dock for your boat, that is water dependent. So yes, you can put a dock in the RPA. Let's see, go through the rest of it. Or if it constitutes development or redevelopment. So again, depending on when there were structures over there, Southport was a great example where the yacht center was, there were structures over there. That was all redevelopment as well. So it got in under a couple different features. They did choose to make it a yacht center, but also because they were redeveloping some of the structures over there, that also constituted an allowance here.
So that would, so you could,
Go ahead.
that could be a tear down and a rebuild,
Potentially, yeah.
because it's developed land that is or has been previously developed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. If we're trying to put in a road somewhere that we didn't have a road there before and it needed to go across RPA land, that could potentially be an allowance, if that's part of our road system and what we're trying to do.
Do we know what 107C is?
No, because again, this came out of their model ordinance and they kept referencing the model ordinance sections. I kicked that back to them today. They need to give me the right guidance as to what's that section today under our proposed ordinance. So I don't have that answer yet.
tried to, come on, it doesn't.
That's in the law?
It's in the model.
That was in the model ordinance when they wrote it up, and so they put their own section numbers in.
Okay.
So I can't follow it, and I'm just too lazy. I'm not going back to look at their model ordinance. I'm telling them, you give me the path. What should be the section number here? Or if we're trying to put in some stormwater features to help with some flooding areas, and it sits somewhere in the RPA, there's an allowance for that to happen. But part of that, which is new, is they are requiring us to do certain assessment evaluations of those things before they just automatically go in. Yes, we've always had a water quality impact assessment requirement. That's nothing new. The new one is this resiliency assessment. So again, we're going to talk about that further as we keep walking through here. That gets described in greater detail of this. But I just want to make you aware that's the first time you're going to see it referenced here.
And I'm sorry, Katie.
Go ahead.
Could you
This is the point.
quick, like, again, 50,000 foot view of like the resiliency assessment. What's the purpose of it? I mean, how?
Sure. So, again, from the state's perspective, they're trying to make sure that we are looking at, if we're going to have this development in the RPA, is it truly going to be a development that is resilient, that can withstand? And it means
Okay.
everything from a building code issue, an environmental concern.
Okay.
It could even be from a fiscally responsible resiliency
Oh, okay.
consideration. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Because they don't want to sit there and say, put it in there, but it costs this community $10 million to maintain it long term. Maybe that's not really resilient for this community. So,
Okay. fair enough.
I can't
Yep.
give you all the examples,
No,
but I'm
I-
just throwing out some
But-
odd ones.
But Katie, if I
Yes.
have a lot that is partially in the RPA and I'm not building in the RPA, I still need to do a resiliency. So I've got a 200-foot lot, I'm gonna build on the 100 feet that's in the RMA, I'm not gonna build on the 100 in the RPA, because I can't. Or will I still need to do a resiliency study? Because I'm
If you,
building,
it's a potential if you were triggered to do a plan of development. And so let me talk to you about plan of development. There are different criteria because, again, the Chesapeake Bay is an overlay ordinance for us. And so at this point, we are putting in certain lands. I don't have to go all the way up to, say, the brewery. I'm going to hit the brewery, which is your further stretch of land coming out of town. While, yes, we have the Chesapeake Bay as an overlay to our entire town, they don't have any of the features, they don't mean anything. They would not have to comply with this component of the ordinance. But elsewhere, if you're going to hit an RPA or RMA, or we're uncertain if you are defined in that fashion, we're going to make you start to go through the plan of development process. It gets triggered if you're going to disturb more than 2,500 square feet of land. So that triggers a lot of development, believe it or not. So if you're building a new home in the historic district alone, you potentially may have to do a full plan of development. What does that mean? I need a site plan. I need you to have done all of your features on your site plan. So make sure if there are wetlands, they've been mapped. If there is RPA, it's been mapped and shown on the site plan. If there is RMA, that would have to now be shown on the site plan. It'd have to give me all your elevation drawings. All those things are actually required for you to build anyway. So part of that is not too hard of a hurdle to do. Yes, they would have to do a water quality impact assessment, which is basically having us look at what is the amount of water that's being created by these structures coming on that's going to have runoff. And we are trying to evaluate, is the quality of water going back into the water still of such an improvement than before? And so part of that is ensuring if there's going to be the type of business, it might be maybe that water usage and what comes off your building and flows onto your ground may have more contamination than, say, a house. I'm going to use that as an example. I'll pick on, say, a golf cart establishment because they are dealing with things that have oil and other contaminants that maybe is not great for going into our water quality. So that's part of what a water quality assessment will help us evaluate and determine. Could we look at other filtration examples to help or solutions to help on that property? So I'm going to come back to a residential consideration. Maybe I'm looking at rainwater gardens to help with some of that filtration. Maybe I am looking at some shallow wells that help where they're going to draw and deal with water cleanup issues on their property. I'm running out of examples to think of off the top of my brain, but those are two I can think of right away. I don't know where I was going now. So those are some of the areas associated with a plan of development. Not everything gets triggered to have to do a plan of development. To date, I have not had to automatically require it of everybody, because again, we've worked with every developer coming in to say, if you give me these things, we're getting there. We're in compliance, you don't have to, we can get you over the hurdle, you don't have to spend any more money to develop this. So I have not been as rigid in requiring a plan of development in a very structured format to date.
Because you're getting all the chapters eventually.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay?
So Katie, how important is the next thing on the historic district?
We're gonna put that off for another
Okay,
night.
all right,
Yes.
I just want to check.
If I could take a few minutes before we close and I just tell you about it, to explain where it is, why you're looking at it, and where I'm hoping to have comment from you on, I'd like to do that before we go away.
Sure.
Okay. This just kind of puts some things into a better alignment of reading this as to what is redevelopment under the RPA. So we wanted to keep it all together, so we have moved things around a little bit. That gives you more information about flood control and stormwater, because again, that doesn't go away, but because it is listed in a whole separate section of our ordinance, people were forgetting that was a requirement. So we wanted to put reference of it back in here as well, so that when you are looking through this as a developer or property owner, you get to see what all the requirements are in one spot, versus trying to read 4 different chapters in this zoning ordinance. So
So
go
this
ahead.
language is not new language? This is
Um,
from the model?
It's from the model, and for me, I asked for ensuring that if somebody is going to develop in the RPA, they're looking in one spot of all the
Sure,
requirements under
sure,
the various
sure,
state laws.
of course.
That's what my goal was, to try and make this as easy as possible for a user.
Absolutely.
Yes. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading. The buffer area requirements, again, that's a word you hear from me a lot, and maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense. Buffer area is just the vernacular we use in here where we start talking about vegetation. That's all this is about, is how we can build infiltration for water to get cleaner as it travels through our groundwater, to travel underground. So we talk about buffer a lot. And so yes, that 100-foot buffer, which is how I refer to the RPA as a buffer area. Because again, we're trying to keep as much of that in the natural buffer state as possible, or that may need supplemental planting, or if there's going to be encroachment or exceptions or allowances made, then we deal with how we want any plantings to accompany it to minimize or negate that impact as best as possible. Oh. So I'm going to flip the page. That moves us over to, they start talking, I think some of the newest thing you're going to see is we start talking about new mature trees, new mature tree plantings. What does that mean? We now have a definition that's being proposed in here. Yes, that is coming out of the model ordinance and out of the new regs that the state adopted. And I can't remember the definition exactly of the mature tree, but we have it in the definition section.
Feet.
We do have a consistency issue right now because it is a different definition than what I have elsewhere under our tree ordinance. So I talked to the state about that today. They don't have an answer for me on that either, considering I use mature trees, in particular canopy, where the canopy of trees is supposed to be, has a different meaning under our current ordinance than it does what they mean under the Bay Act. So for example, when we talk about a canopy of mature trees, what do you guys think I'm talking about when I say that? I'm gonna throw it out to you first. Nothing's wrong, just give me what you think.
A lot of foliage.
Foliage, where would you want a canopy of trees? Sidewalks? Across your road systems? Isn't that what's happening in the historic district? You have a canopy of trees now. That is the intent of this town with its tree ordinance, is it's trying to have plantings of trees occur close to your property line, so it builds that canopy over to create that shaded
Right.
look as you walk through the town, right?
Yeah.
Am I getting it wrong? Tell me if I'm getting it wrong.
That's what I think of. I think you want a shaded area.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
They don't necessarily mean that, they mean a canopy of trees, but they may want it down by the creek. So part of this is me trying to understand, because when we talk about in our ordinance, we talk about where its relationship is to sidewalks. Whereas if I'm going to Bay Creek, that has nothing to do with sidewalks.
Right.
At least where they, in this case, want the trees for canopy of trees, it is associated with the RPA. The RPA is generally not near the sidewalks that are in Bay Creek.
Right.
Just putting that out
Right.
there.
Right.
So that is, I'm flagging it to you because yes, the mature tree language is one of those requirements they want in this ordinance now. I just need to now figure out how I phrase it differently for how we intend it to be meant and applied throughout our town.
That wouldn't make sense in the RPA of Bay Creek.
I know
That's
that.
where you don't want shade.
That's correct.
Right.
Well, we want some vegetation. It may not be the mature tree
Sure.
plantings. There are other options I could have, whether it be bushes or shrubs or some other natural grass
Right,
vegetation, maybe not mature trees.
Right.
Maybe not the full growth.
why
But
wouldn't-
along those RPA's, sorry, they're all trees right now.
you know, why
Well,
not?
Not everyone is that way. If you go, once you start putting in homes,
Yeah.
there is the ability to start doing some thinning of your tree line. That is an allowance. Granted, it has to be permitted and approved with the plan, but you
Sure.
can do some of that, so you can have some of that vista, which is why you may have purchased that property to get that water feature look, right?
Yeah, I understand that, but you wouldn't want someone to clear cut
No,
And
they can't
plant-
clear cut.
They can't
and
clear
plant 5 little box trees that they
Yeah.
purchased from that.
And I agree, that's why there needs
That's
to be a
why they
little,
not the mature tree language.
that's why we need to be a little more nuanced in our tree language in the Chesapeake Bay Act, because I need to distinguish it from where we apply it elsewhere in the town. So we got a little bit more work to do on this. I don't have the right language for you yet. I'm flagging it to let you know I'm coming back here in the next couple of weeks, hopefully with some cleaned up language as it relates to the mature tree section here in the ordinance, okay?
And one of the things that hit me was, in one of the areas, 3, I think it was, you talk about even pruning requires requests from, the zoning administrator.
It does, yes.
Is that
Under the Chesapeake Bay Act.
Is it mandatory? So I want to take a little bit of a growth off that tree that's not healthy. I
If
gotta
it's in
come.
the RPA, yes,
gotta
it must
come
come
see
through
you.
me, yes,
Yes.
yeah. Doesn't mean you can't get to the yes, but yeah, I've gotta see a plan first before you just start cutting, yeah. If you're in the RPA. This doesn't apply town-wide if it's
No,
not
I'm
in the
just saying,
RPA.
in the RPA, I want to take one small branch off, clean something up, make it look,
And it
healthier.
could be as simple as you've called my office, you've given us pictures of what you're trying to do. I may send Jack out that afternoon to go look and verify, and we take some more pictures, and we say, yep, you can do that now. Yeah. And he likes going out in the golf cart on those site visits, trust me. He wants to get away from me. We talk about the encroachments that are allowed in the buffer. Again, I've talked a lot about, they don't tell you very specific things. Everything is about what is reasonable for a structure. Those are the encroachments that are allowed. So again, I've walked you through what they do consider reasonable. So when there have been court cases on this, these are some of the standards that I've been articulating to you, what have been expressed in court cases, what the courts have said yes or no to for encroachment in the buffer areas of the RPA. Moving our way down, if you guys are good to keep going. The whole buffer, there's lots of language here. Again, lots of stuff on the trees. So again, as I said, I'm going to be coming back with some cleanup of this section after I finish with the state, and hopefully we'll get our language here in the next couple of weeks for you. Same thing on the next page is all dealing with these tree issues. There's a whole section of stuff here.
What is the highlighted language?
Where are you again?
I've just,
Talks
I'm
about
on,
the tree, the sheet back up there on.
no, but there's language that's highlighted separate and apart from the redlined language?
Yeah.
Is there some sort of,
E1 and 4.
yeah,
Yeah, this is again where it's highlighted, all of this is.
E1A and E1B,
The
yeah.
mature trees
Yeah.
is this requirement that's coming in under the state law.
Oh, this is
and
state law requirement.
State regs.
Okay, thank you.
As I said, we've still got to figure out how I marry this appropriately within our zoning ordinance as a whole.
Okay, so the highlighted language is state law reg requirements. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, are you looking at maybe some grasses? Is that what you're thinking?
I don't have the answers yet. And so I'm gonna ask that we defer any further conversation. I want to kind of lay the problem. I think I have at this point. I don't have a solution yet. So give me time and hopefully by our next meeting, I'll have some different language for you to consider. Adaption measures for locations within the RPA. So again, that talks about all the things that we're trying to lessen. If you are going to develop in the RPA, some of the mitigation efforts we want you to employ. And then that brings me to intensely developed areas, section number 2. And Bill is correct. I have to have some of this language in. As I keep moving down, we do have the IDA. Yes, that's a given. And that's the language we have to have in here. Number 3, I talked to the state about this. They recognize we currently don't have any land zoned agricultural in our town, but it's a requirement to have this language in the ordinance. That's the first one that's in here about this. So it's in here, even though we have nothing zoned agricultural. It doesn't
We do
mean
have
we can't.
agricultural, we do have agriculture.
Uses, but
Uses.
nothing that is zoned
I know.
agricultural. So there's a difference. The zoning could change one day and the town chooses to do that. It could happen through the incorporation or expansion of town boundaries potentially even. So they want us to have the language in here. So that's the first one I wanted to talk to you about. So all that ag language is a lot getting added. Yeah, for the most part, I'm never going to use it in my job responsibilities, but there it is. And that brings me 7.7, conflict with other regs, that's pretty easy. 7.8, the interpretation of RPA boundaries. So again, if somebody should question it, what's the process of how we deal with those questions? I will tell you one of the things that I did put in place when I came here, I no longer, we took that out of the zoning ordinance as well, as you may recall, I no longer will do an RPA measurement. One, because I don't know how. I just don't have that skill set. It's not what I went to school for at any way, shape, or form. That's a responsibility of a surveyor to do. And so that is part of this, while it's mandatory language of the interpretation, it gets a lot easier because there's no staff person who's making the distinction. This is the RPA line first. It's the surveyor that's been hired by the property owner to go do the survey. They then submit that to me. If I should question the results of that survey, I then go walk the property with the surveyor and verify their assumptions and what they used to say where that natural line was coming in, where was the average mean high water mark, or the features they used to determine the RPA, if there happens to be any of those questions. Have I done any of those since I've been here? Yes, I have. I walked, especially in the colony, we walked that beach a lot, let me tell you. Because there were nuances in every one of those codes as to where the RPA line was going to be drawn. So for the most part, we have found the resolution in working with the developers and their contractual staff on this, but I no longer have that responsibility to administer, determine, or inform what the RPA is for the first time ever. It is the surveyor's job to do that on behalf of the property. Then there's some tweaks here in the general performance standards of section 7.9. Again, we're adding in the mature tree consideration here. Not terrible to consider that. And then as I come to on-site sewage, I'm with you, because again, we do have a town ordinance that we do not have any septic allowances in this town. However,
There are a couple,
there are a couple still.
like the cement plant.
So I will try and push back again, because there's a lot of language that got added in here. If we can strike this based upon our town code provision. I kicked that out to them today. They were gonna go run it up the flagpole from their bosses to see if that is an addition we can make to strike all this language. But for now, it's in because it was in the model ordinance, okay? That gets me through quite a bit. As I then move to the next page, there's a new red 7, any Chesapeake Bay preservation land disturbing activity is defined in blah, blah, blah. So there's some language here. Again, we've talked about land disturbance. This is not just what I consider, this is part of Jeb's world too from the building side of things. So if anybody's digging dirt, that's land disturbance. So it may not just be, you may not be putting in a house, but if you're digging dirt, you're putting in a driveway, that's land disturbance. Just so you know that. Yes, if you're digging a hole, that's definitely land disturbance, but just, I don't need you to create a crater. But any land disturbance, or you're putting something else on top of that land, that's land disturbance for us, okay?
You mean me planting a bush, I have to come talk to you?
No, bush, because that's not a permanent feature from our
Okay,
perspective.
all right.
So you can plant to your heart's content, we love plants. You didn't catch that from this whole conversation, I failed at my job already.
I don't know if it seems like it flips back and forth.
Green things are good. How's that?
Multicolors are good too.
So I'm going to keep, a lot of this deals with everything associated with conservation practices, things along those lines. If you have particular questions, I'll do my best to answer this, but most of this is coming out of the model ordinance at this point. Some things we are striking to put in this new language, as you're seeing. Big whole sections are being struck because we're moving things around in here, of where we're placing things. So I'm jumping us all the way down to section 7.10. Okay. So here's where they really start to talk about the new resiliency assessment. So again, the water quality impact assessment has been in our ordinance from the beginning. And we have that language, we have forms for that, a process to handle that within our office, and we're doing that today. It is the new section of the resiliency piece that's come in here. Sorry, I gotta go through a few things. Yes, I moved us out 6 pages or so to get to the resiliency new section, which is a G. So most of what you're seeing is already in our ordinance. Keep on flipping your way through till you get to G. So past evaluation procedures, which was F, then G is resiliency assessment.
Would this be a good place to start?
I think so, because this is a heavy conversation and where I pushed back a lot today with the staff to get further clarity from DEQ on this entire section. So they are going to try and get me something within 2 weeks, I hope. So I hopefully can get something out to you before we start another conversation on this. So I'm going to stop us there.
You're going to talk to us about,
Yes, let me talk to you really briefly about the other document you got before you.
yeah,
So yes, I included a cover staff report. Please make sure you read that as to why you're seeing this. But rightfully so is recognized, we should have greater clarity both in the overlay ordinance for the historic district as well as the guidelines to provide greater demonstration of what is meant by the various categories of work you could be doing on your home. This has not gone to the town council yet, because this really came out of that conversation with town council when the Board of Zoning Appeals occurred last year now? Whenever it was, roughly a year ago. And so I have run this through both our prior town manager and our new town manager have been through this entire document with me at this point. I received their endorsement to send it to you first and start having you look at it and get your narrative and input and review of this prior to it going on to the town council. Because this really will be a proposed zoning text amendment initiated by town council. So I'm just putting that out there first because they may not like everything we're recommending, but we wanted to give them a jumping off point of their conversation. So that's the first thing. So yes, we are proposing changes in the overlay ordinance itself to the historic district. We've highlighted all of those in various colors. More importantly, we are proposing adding a whole new document into our guidelines. That's why it has a whole different look of things. We are going to want to spend a fair amount of time with you at your next meeting, kind of walking through that. I'm not saying we got it perfect. This was a staff-created product at this point in time. This is based upon the work and projects that we've seen come through the district in all its various little iterations, requests for the minors little thing. We've kind of listed out and then classify it where if it's this, then yeah, you can do this to maintain your home, nothing further needed from us. Versus a minor work, which may require a permit that I can issue to you, versus a major work, which is going over to the Historic District Review Board for them to sign off on, or whatever their decision may be. And the last column is really from an internal workflow. We wanted to add something so that we are putting some onus out there that there's supposed to be follow-up inspections. We want to actually go view the work while it's progressing and make sure it's complying with the ordinance or the approval permit that was issued, and that we're just kind of closing the gap and shutting down permits when they're finished. We don't want to have all of these certificates of appropriateness open on our books for years on end, which is where we are today. We're trying to build in our process like Jeb has under the building world, where he closes out permits. He does inspections. We're trying to build in the inspection piece to our department as well. So I just want to give you some guidance as you're looking at this. Any changes are open, absolutely open for consideration. So, Ian.
The routine maintenance.
Yes.
The way I read this, and let me know, you need to still go to the zoning administrator's office to do routine maintenance? Or is the intent to make it so I can do routine maintenance without talking to anybody?
We would like there to be a phone call,
So,
email to us, a text message to us, or a visit right, knock on our door.
so
Let's just
somebody
verify.
somebody chips a piece of paint on my step, and I go out with the little paintbrush and touch it. I'm
Yeah.
coming over to see Jack.
Or you're just calling my office and say, here's what's happening, this is what we want to do. Great, do it.
See, I think
And it's a 2-second conversation.
it's not a 2-second conversation, because the issue becomes, I'm a compliant person, I come and do that. 80% of my neighbors are not compliant and aren't gonna do that. And as my wife, who was a school teacher, they give the kids a book this big of all the rules and regulations, and they never enforce them, and therefore there are no rules and regulations. So I would be very wary about asking people for touch-up paint, you know,
Well, this is
seal
why
on
we need to
their
have the
thing.
conversation as a
So-
whole. Yes.
So I'm just gonna throw my opinion, because so many people who aren't gonna be aware of these things are doing minor little touch-ups on their houses, and this says you should come into the zoning office and tell people.
This is why we put it before you, because we're asking for your input before we move it on to town council for them to start figuring out, does this resolve and meet what they were trying to.
So this
to
isn't a
do about?
retreat from more restrictive requirements,
We're trying to get clarity across.
just clarity, okay?
Yes, because we do feel the current ordinance has that ambiguity between what is routine maintenance, what is minor work, what is major work. And actually, they use different terminology today. So, yeah, we're trying to get that clarity built in here in some form or fashion, so.
The problem that we run into, I know we're not really talking about it tonight, is that unlike an HOA where you get a binder and you agree to the rules before you, as you buy your house, especially in the historic district, may be different in Bay Creek, but you don't necessarily know what the rules are. So the rules came about and became so strict, I think, because people said, oh yeah, I'm just painting my house, but then ended up painting their brick, which you're not allowed to do. Or they said, oh, my porch is rotten and I'm just gonna replace some boards. And oh, actually, when I went to the store, the AZEK was less than the wood, so I just got AZEK. And suddenly you've got, you know, people kind of going off on tangents. And yes, at the end of the day, they're, you know, most of the time improving upon their situation, but in some instances, they're kind of going down a path that breaks the rules. So how do you have the proper amount of oversight without it being too restrictive?
And again, I'm not trying to get into the conversation tonight, but this is
Yeah.
part of it. That's why the way we drafted this is say, come talk to the staff first. Because we actually have really good experience in this issue. And so, like you just said, all I'm gonna do is replace 3 of the windows. So say it's not just a chip paint. I'm replacing 3 of the windows. That's easy maintenance work. broke some panes and need to replace those. And then you discover in the process, wow, boy, I got some rotten wood here. I've got to take out all the frames now. I got to replace all the sills. You've moved beyond what is routine maintenance. You're starting to move into that minor work. And part of it is, then they decide, well, I'm not going to do wood. It is cheaper. I'm going to do the vinyl. So I'm just going to go get my vinyl. Now I'm replacing these 3 windows. We're going to do the whole house now. So we end up having those conversations with people saying, okay, these are the things. If this happens, this is what it's going to trigger. These are the requirements. This is how far you can get before you're going to step into needing a different review and approval letter. So we do have those conversations of really talking to the property owner. What else you thinking about doing? Because it happens this way almost every single time. I'm only going to paint my front door. And then you decide, boy, I don't like the frames on the transoms above it. I'm gonna swap out the whole door feature. That's a key feature in a historic district. Doors are a big issue. And so you're thinking, I just started painting my door. I don't know why the town got all over me and put a stop work order on me when I took out the whole door. It happens a lot. So I'm hearing you, Clayton. It is, we want to be able to give you a clear understanding of what we're going to say is routine maintenance, but checking with us stops the slide down into the next categories that get you in trouble.
But then policing people who aren't coming to you becomes the slide down the other side that you gotta look at, because
Yes.
once you let 2 people not do it, everyone's gonna say, well, you didn't capture them.
All I
And so-
can tell you is I've got a community in the historic district of roughly a good, I don't know, 700 full-time residents. They are my eyes and ears on the ground better than you can ever imagine. So we get lots of calls to our office ratting out everybody else in the neighborhood. So, just making you aware of that.
Are fee structures going to be a part of this conversation here, or will that be a council thing?
That's a town council. That is solely their domain. Okay?
All right,
So we're going to pick up on this
I get to do
discussion at the
both.
next meeting.
Yes, we will continue finishing out the Chesapeake Bay Act first, and then this will be the next
And
thing.
then we'll have a more fulsome discussion of the historic
Oh, yes.
review.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And hopefully Tracy will be joining us, Tracy Allen from my office will be joining us, because she is the primary staff person charged to staff the historic district overlay and its administration. So she is even better versed on this than I am. Okay?
Mr.
okay,
Chairman,
great.
can I make a
No,
motion?
wait. We've got a standing staff report. You have anything else to add other than what you have in your written?
I gave, no, not what was written. I gave you the updates from the
Yeah.
last BZA meeting, and that was it.
Okay. Thank you. Next planning commission meeting is July 1st.
Do you guys wish to meet on July 1st? Because I know we're headed, that's right into the holiday weekend, so we wanted to have that conversation.
Well, the 4th is a Friday, so I'm here.
I'm here.
If you're
Okay,
good,
we
we're
got,
good,
we
we'll
got
keep it.
4, okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, everybody good, staying July 1?
Yep.
Okay,
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.